Ladies and gentlemen, today, Kamala Harris, she's not a shoo-in for the nomination, not quite yet. They've got a conference coming up, a convention next week in Chicago. She is doing what we call the basement campaign approach, silent, no press conference. She's having a few things drip out bit by bit, but they were already written for Administrator Biden. All they've done is change the name and change the faces of their platform. Where is she? Why isn't she talking? Not that I expect her to, not before this convention. But ladies and gentlemen, the nomination is not locked up. A lot of people angry that they didn't get a voice in the selection of Kamala Harris. Plus, a deep dive and a look at Tim Walz, the monster behind the grandpa. All of this today. Ladies and gentlemen, the right side with Doug Billings is now upon you. Are you ready? Let's go.
Hey everybody, my name is General Mike Flynn, and I'm here to do a big shout out for my great friend and one of the best in the business, Mr. Doug Billings. Right side with Doug Billings, right side with Doug Billings. Doug is the future of the airwaves when it comes to independent broadcasters and podcasters. He is the new Rush Limbaugh. He's exactly what America needs right now, looking for honesty, looking for wisdom, looking for truth, looking for patriotism. Listen to Doug Billings at Right Side with Doug Billings. God bless you and God bless America, and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are winning. We're winning, winning, winning. Welcome to the Right Side with Doug Billings. Are you ready?
We are not liberal snowflakes who melt away in the face of tragedy, adversity, and challenge. We are a covenant nation under God, and his divine providence is not dead and it's not gone. It is living within each and every one of you. And you will bring it to life in such a way that the world has never seen before. We never back down. We never give up. We march forward.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Right Side. Doug Billings here with you. Thanks again for the honor of a lifetime to be able to be with you, to speak with you, have you call into the show to talk with me about the issues of the day. It's just an honor. I'm blessed beyond belief with regards to you all being there with me. I am here. We're going to talk about Kamala Harris, her campaign of silence, the campaign of non-transparency. And we're going to take a deep look into Tim Walz and what the people in Minnesota, especially people in law enforcement, are telling us about Governor Tampon Tim. All of this coming up tonight. Before I do, I just do want to thank you again for standing with me. It's been a long 4 years, right? So I started this show 4 years ago, right after the theft of an American presidential election, a pandemic, and so forth. And you have been there, and you've been with me on DougBillings.us. I appreciate that very much. And that's where I have always asked that you would prayerfully consider heading over, making a monthly recurring donation to the program so that I can continue to bring it to you. I am a one-man show. It's just me. This is how I make a living, but it's also how I deliver the truth. I never charge you. The show is always free. But you, I ask to prayerfully consider, what is the truth worth to you? What is this program worth? So if you're on X, please follow me. Please share the show. YouTube, same thing. Subscribe over there so you always get notifications. Follow me on X and set your notifications to go off whenever I post so that you're in touch with me and you have access to the truth. Rumble and the good people over at worldviewtube.com. Don't forget to check out that website as well. Spreely TV. And most of all, again, DougBillings.us. Please head over there and again, prayerfully consider that monthly recurring donation. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today, no-show Kamala. Where is she? She's not only a no-show, there is no show behind the show, if you know what I mean. The fake demanded enthusiasm is fading away, and you can tell. Look, she has never been their first number one choice. They only gave her this opportunity, selected her, behind the back of the people within that party, mind you, a civics lesson, really. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But there is anger and resentment. There is pushback. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out next week during their convention up in Chicago. They will experience pushback from groups like Black Lives Matter, who have made public statements about being unhappy with the fact that the rank and file members within that party have not been given a voice. And isn't it typical? The radical liberal commune socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, the woke liberal radical mob that they are, The elites within that hierarchy did not allow the people of the party to have a voice. They're stuck with Kamala because she's a DEI hire. I've commented on that before. They've painted themselves into this corner. They can't fire her. She's a woman of color, so forth and so on. Administrator Biden made the claim early on in his campaign back in 2020. He was only going to consider a woman for the vice presidency, which in very many ways violates the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity laws that we have in this country. You're not supposed to be able to hire and give someone a job based on their sex, their gender, their race, their nationality, their ethnicity, any of that. Oh, but the law doesn't matter. The radical liberal commune socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, does it anyway. They break the law. Tim Walz, people in Minnesota beginning to speak up about it. I'm going to come back to Kamala towards the end of the show. But Timmy boy, Tampon Tim here, needs to be addressed. People in Minnesota are beginning to speak up. Now, Minnesota, much like California, is a red state, ladies and gentlemen. On paper, they're blue, but there is a lot of red, if you will, a lot of conservative elements within. If you get outside of Minneapolis, it is mostly red. So I want to be sure that you understand this and understand and hear what people are saying about Governor Walz. It's important. And you will not hear this anywhere else. Of course, it's not going to be reported in the legacy media. It's not going to be reported on mainstream media. It's not going to be reported on social media platforms unless you tune into my program. And that's, by the way, after all, how you all become members of the most intellectually mature audience in all of podcast land. No, really, it's true. That's actually documented to be true. Congratulations on that intellectual maturity. You're going to need it and use it as you begin to look at what's happening with this campaign. The ticket of terror, as I call them, Harris and Walz, law enforcement officers in Minnesota, entire police departments, fire departments, first responders, even statewide medical institution executives and line level employees in hospitals and so forth are beginning to speak up loud and clear about their governor, Tim Walz. He is, according to all reports coming out, not a moderate. This is how the radical left woke mob in the hierarchy of the commune socialists, formerly known as Democrat Party, is trying to paint Tim as a moderate. Ladies and gentlemen, he's the furthest from a moderate you can get. He and Kamala Harris represent the single most liberal, woke, radicalized ticket for president and vice president in this republic's history. In fact, thousands of people in Minnesota coming out telling us all about Tim. Radically against American law enforcement, does not want anything to do with law and order. Publicly has made statements about such things. He's against and stands in direct opposition to the work and the dedication of first responders, from police to fire department officials to EMS and ambulance drivers, hospital workers, etc. I'm going to get to the proof. He's been labeled as an anarchist. He's been labeled as someone who enables anarchy within the state. Evidence of the obvious is sufficient. You've seen pictures and videos of Minneapolis on fire during the summer of 2020 when George Floyd riots broke out in that state and in that town, and Governor Walz did nothing. And ladies and gentlemen, it's important to look at what nothing really is and what it does. Doing nothing enables these anarchists. So in many real ways, Governor Walz has blood on his hands with regards to these riots. He did nothing. He has intentionally let Minneapolis and other cities throughout Minnesota struggle, burn, and crumble. It's been an ongoing problem since those days back in 2020. Citizens throughout the state, I'm telling you, members of police departments, fire departments, executives within hospitals are all saying he doesn't truly like the police. He does not want law and order. He purposefully sets chaos and crisis in motion and then does nothing to stop it until it suits him. like it is now, right? Election year. He will act like he's interested in stopping it. He will say that he's a good old boy and have pictures with his hunting dog and shotgun out in the fields of Minnesota. He's a hunter. He's pro-gun. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a show. He is not a good old boy, moderate. He will take your guns. People know this governor in Minnesota, and it does us well to listen to what they're saying. Minnesota may be a blue state on paper, like I mentioned, but just as in California, as in Oregon, as in Washington state, there are huge pockets of conservative men and women. And it wouldn't be surprising at all to learn that Minnesota is, in fact, a red state with a majority of conservatives in it, but that there are election integrity issues that have kept us from realizing that on paper. Governor Walz is anti-police. He wants to defund them. He is anti-fire department. He's anti-emergency services. And according to Minnesota, there's a Minnesota retired patrol lieutenant named John Nagel. I saw an interesting article about him today. According to John Nagel, Walz doesn't care about police families. It's obvious, for example, when you have many police families who unfortunately have suffered the loss of a family member who was a police officer who lost his or her life in the line of duty. When you have these families tell Governor Tim Walz that they do not want him at the funeral, that says that speaks encyclopedia volumes about the guy and about what they think of him. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being Governor Walz and wanting to go to a funeral of a fallen police? Not that he would, but to be told publicly, Governor Walz, stay away. You're not welcome at these funerals. And it does us well to know these stories because, ladies and gentlemen, this is typical communist-socialist, formerly known as Democrat. It's typical behavior from them. They choose to put forth monsters as candidates. And they try to dress them up as the guy next door, as your grandfather, your father figure, whatever. They are monsters in so much as what they stand for and what they represent, what they do, and sometimes more importantly, what they fail to do, what they don't do on purpose, such as protect the people in that state from riots, looting, arson, and anarchy. Anti-police officers, anti-firemen, anti-first responders, anti-hospital workers. And it goes on and deeper, just as these things become more and more significant to us. But radical liberals like Governor Tim Walz take their radical liberalism to the next lowest level. They continue to drive us down. There is no joy and happiness surrounding Tim Walz or Kamala Harris. It's ridiculous and it's insulting to our intelligence to watch the campaign thrust that mantra about joy and happiness. There is absolutely no joy and happiness in America precisely because of the policies, the platform, and the politics of the radical liberal woke agenda. Governor Tim Walz is an anarchist. Evidence of the obvious about all of this is sufficient, ladies and gentlemen. Look at what he's done. Look what he stands for. Look at what he has failed to do. And it's not so matter about failing, quote unquote. It's about refusing, really, what he's refused to do. Send in National Guard troops, bolster up, and fund the police. Last year in Pope County, Minnesota, there was a widow of Sheriff Deputy Josh Owen, who was Deputy Owen, unfortunately, was killed in the line of duty. And that family, Deputy Josh Owen was killed, by the way, responding to a domestic violence call. He was killed in the line of duty. The family told Walz, stay away. We don't want you anywhere. He doesn't support law enforcement. We do not want him. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be talking much more about Tim this hour. I'm going to give you an insight that you all need to know. Share this program on X, on all of your social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, wherever you're watching it. Share it. The truth that you only find here needs to be shared. I will be right back. You're going to take a break. Don't forget DougBillings.us. Head over there after this show. Wait for me right here. I'll be right back. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that you could change the trajectory of your aging process? Look and feel better, live younger, be more active, less pain when you move around, sleep better, diminish the lines and the wrinkles on your face? Really? This is what I'm telling you. It's possible. You see, low stem cell activity happens when we get older. And it could be causing many of the health problems that some people have in the world today. Because as we get older, we have less stem cell activity, which means we age faster and we heal slower. The secret is a clinically proven and patented phototherapy non-transdermal patch, whose technology is the result of over 90 clinical studies and over 20 years of research. Your healthier life can begin today, and you can discover true age reversal. Age reversal, ladies and gentlemen. Please go to liveyounger.with.doug.us. liveyounger.with.doug.us, ladies and gentlemen. Get over there today. Or if you'd like, text my name, Doug, to 41372. Doug, text it, 41372. And get over to liveyounger.with.doug.us. Get younger, feel younger. I'm doing it. I'm wearing this patch. I feel great. And so will you. God bless you, ladies and gentlemen. For the Republic. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
I want to tell you about the good people over at EMP Shield, electromagnetic pulse. Electromagnetic pulse, ladies and gentlemen. It can fry your home electrical system or your vehicle's electrical system. But if you attach one of these, now this is for your breaker box at home. There's a smaller version that goes on your battery of your car, your vehicle, that will prevent it from being fried in the event of an electromagnetic pulse. Because as you know, thanks to Administrator Biden, many people coming across the border now who don't exactly have the best of intentions. Protect yourself. EMPshield.com. Get huge discounts over there if you use the promo code Doug.
Doug Billings, reminding you that conservatives are better looking than liberals.
Right Side with Doug Billings. Hey, by the way, if you want to get involved today on the program, we're going out live across the planet. The phone number, 901-316-8404. 901-316-8404. We'll be opening up the lines here in a moment. You want to get in line? As they say over across the pond, get in the queue, ladies and gentlemen. Please stand in the queue, and we will take your phone calls, 901-316-8404. We can talk about the topic of the day here. Governor Tampon Tim Walz and Kamala, the vice pretender, Harris. So Walz facing a huge outpouring. I guess that we could use that word. Backlash, outpouring, a surge of comments about how he is not liked, about what people really think about him. And it is not pleasant. It is not a pleasant picture. It is certainly not a picture of joy and happiness. The tagline that the radical left communist socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, has chosen to use in association with the Harris-Walz terror ticket. But a major reason that law enforcement in Minnesota is unhappy with Walz is of his refusal to engage in sending help to that state, especially in Minneapolis during the summer of 2020, during the George Floyd riots. Most of us can recall and watching that on the news and on TV. So in typical, it's so infuriating, in typical liberal fashion. Because, ladies and gentlemen, look, if there's not a crisis, if there's no chaos, the radical liberal hierarchy has nothing. There's no functionality within that party, within their mechanism of how to take control of people's lives. They need crisis. They need chaos. So if crisis and chaos aren't in existence, if there is no chaos, if there is no crisis, they will create them. And they do this intentionally, of course, because they think that when people are in crisis and chaos, it causes them to panic and reach out and look towards the government for help, the federal government to swoop in, just like they did during the pandemic. The government swoops in, tells people to stay home from work. We're going to pay you cash to stay home. It's what they do. And what it is a form of slavery, really. They keep you enslaved to entitlements. And in the process of doing that, and I know that President Trump was in office during the pandemic, but it was the radical left, liberal, commune socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, who crushed, wrecked, and disabled our economy, telling people to stay home, don't go to work. We're going to give you money. We'll take care of you. It's absolutely obvious that they purposefully destroyed the economy, wrecked it. So this, again, John Nagel is a retired Minnesota State Patrol lieutenant. And he's retired. He's speaking out on behalf of many. There's thousands of John Nagels in the state of Minnesota, ladies and gentlemen. I read an article today, and he's in there telling us that for the last 4 years, what I have been telling you since day one of this program, what I have just said, purposeful chaos, purposeful crisis. It's as if crisis and chaos are the patron demons of the radical left woke party. And they stir up and wake up crisis and chaos at every opportunity. John Nagel, this retired Minnesota lieutenant from the state, a trooper, believes that. He says, yeah, that's correct. They purposefully inflict this upon us. Governor Tim Walz let Minneapolis burn. And ladies and gentlemen, he did it on purpose. Their evidence of the obvious is sufficient. There is no other reason. There is no other. You must only be able to draw that conclusion if you're anywhere near intellectual maturity. That's exactly what the radical left liberal playbook calls for. Purposeful chaos, purposeful crisis. If they don't exist, create them. The George Floyd incident, the unfortunate demise and the death of George Floyd was the fuse that caused the explosion of these riots in Minneapolis. And that was all they needed for their crisis and their chaos. And when they swoop in, these radical liberal politicians, especially during election years, they pretend as if they're interested in solving the crisis. And they talk a big game. Kamala Harris just the other day said something, I'm going to paraphrase her quote, but basically something like this. She said, hey, if you elect me and put me in office, I'm going to solve all of these problems. Well, ladies and gentlemen, she's already in office. So this is the lunacy of the left. Hey, elect me and I'll solve all this. Never mind that I caused it. Never mind that it's a result, all of this chaos and all of this crisis is a result of my policies, my platform, and my politics. I'm going to solve it if you just reelect me this time. I mean, they must think they do. They think you're absolutely stupid is what they think. We are rising up. I'm telling you, there's hope. There's a great reawakening happening. And I'm telling you, this retired Minnesota state trooper, Lieutenant John Nagel, is one of the people who's waking up. And there are millions of him. That's the good news. He believes that the reason for Governor Tim Walz inaction is rooted in his dislike of the police. He's also mentioned a dislike and a coordinated dislike of the police in Minnesota by a gentleman by the name of Keith Ellison, who is that state's attorney general. These people, you've got Tim Walz as governor who unleashes anarchy and arson and riots, rape, murder, burning, pillaging, etc., all aimed primarily at Minnesota businesses, but families as well. And you've got that inaction of him there is no action from him. So in essence, he's enabling the anarchists to go forward. And then you have the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, who does not arrest, I shouldn't say arrest, but who does not prosecute, doesn't prosecute with extreme prejudice these criminals, these anarchists. And you've seen someone else who hasn't done that in her career as an Attorney General, as a district attorney, Kamala Harris. We'll get to her in a minute. But Ellison and Walz have worked to defund the police together in Minnesota for years. Back in 2020, Walz publicly supported what they call alternatives to policing. Yes, the Minnesota City Council comes up with this catchphrase, alternatives to policing. What are we going to do in Minnesota? Since we're defunding the police, we have to come up with some alternatives. It's comical if it wasn't so tragic, right? We only need to play the tape, right? We all have seen it a million times. If you want evidence, Look it up. The burning of Minneapolis. We've seen it a million times. Governor Tim Walz let Minneapolis burn for 3 days, ladies and gentlemen, 3 nights. And he did absolutely nothing about it. And I would suggest to you that by not doing anything about it, he was enabling, in fact, encouraging the anarchists. And he has the audacity, Tim Walz does, to not just audacity, but in my opinion, also the immoral judgment to classify the riots. And you're going to love this. He doesn't call them riots. He doesn't mention the word anarchists or arson. No. These were all gatherings of righteous anger, according to Governor Tim Walz. He actually said those words. This is righteous anger, as the Molotov cocktail goes flying by, behind him and strikes a vehicle, a police vehicle, lights it on fire. It's Kookville. Righteous anger. I mean, are you kidding us, Governor Walz? The righteous anger that he's talking about caused hundreds of millions of dollars in his state. Families lost their livelihood and their businesses. They lost their lives. And this righteous anger saw people beaten, raped, murdered, storefronts smashed because the radical left domestic terror groups Black Lives Matter and Antifa had pallets of bricks, rocks, and stones delivered to downtown street corners in Minneapolis so that they could be used to throw through the windows of stores and businesses and homes. As in the case in almost every liberal state in America, people are leaving Minnesota by the thousands. And it's because of Governor Tim Walz and his dismantling of the public safety standards they have in that state. For people who are not familiar with this monster, Tim Walz is one of the worst. He is not honest, he is power hungry, and he's not doing anything that you see in the media as a result of the campaign for the good of the people. There is no joy and happiness attached to this man. Evidence of the obvious is sufficient. He's doing everything for himself, and he's just the kind of candidate. He's the perfect candidate for the elite members of the radical hierarchy, liberal, communist-socialist Democrats. He's perfect because he's controllable. He's perfect because he follows orders. He's perfect because, again, he'll do whatever he's told, and he's demonstrated the depth and width of his liberalism by allowing Minneapolis and other cities within Minnesota to burn. And it's absolutely a powerful image when you think about it. They could have chosen a number of people, the radical left hierarchy, but they chose Tim Walz. And when you look at his record and when you look at what he's done, it is shocking. All right, I've got a couple of people on the phone lines. We're going to get to those. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I appreciate it every day when you join me on the phone calls to talk about these topics, the topics of the day. 901-316-8404. If you want to get in, there are some people waiting in line. 901-316-8404. Reagan, let's pick up the first call. Let's go to David in Florida. David, welcome to the right side. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Doug, how are you? This is my second time calling into your show and speaking to you. How are you doing today?
David, fine. I'm glad to have you back. I'm doing well. How about you?
All right. Listen, I just wanted to talk to you about something that I think is extremely important. I do believe that President Trump, even though we're going to see some very unprecedented things happen, I do believe that President Trump does get into office. Okay. With everything that the Lord has brought him through, as far as being impeached twice, exonerated, all these court cases dropping off one by one, an attempted assassination, the Lord would not bring President Trump through all of this stuff and still going forward very strong unless he had plans for him. That's I believe we're seeing God's providence play out before our eyes. Okay. Yes. However, I also think that I think it's extremely important. In fact, I beseech you to try and implore your listening audience to pray for President Trump to ask the Lord for wisdom. The man has obviously an extreme amount of knowledge when it comes to the business world and understanding things as far as geopolitically and all of that. But unfortunately, we've seen a lot of things where, especially concerning the people that he surrounds himself with a lack of wisdom. Okay? And remember, the Bible says that, it says that whoever lacks wisdom, God gives generously. They should ask God, because God gives generously without finding fault. Okay, and yes. I think your listening audience should start praying that President Trump, reaches up and asks the Lord for a whole lot of wisdom, because there's going to be all kinds of things that are going to try and divert his attention here and divert his attention there, and he needs to stay straightforward. It's not just knowledge; it's wisdom that makes the difference. And then also the other thing that I wanted to cover with you, and perhaps you can educate me on this regard, as far as I know, as far as Civics 101. Okay. And trust me, I realize that when they talk about the left and the right, we're talking about the aisle sitting in Congress, the Democrats off to the left and the Republicans off to the right. However, I'm getting tired of being called a far-right conservative, because as far as I know, as far as Civics 101, if you were to get out a piece of paper and draw a line across the bottom of that paper, on the far left of that line, if you were to write down no law or anarchy, and on the far right of that line, if you were to write down total government or tyranny, our founding fathers sought to find the balanced center. And I think that's extremely important, because when you call us a far-right conservative and you look at that line, that means I'm for big government and tyranny. No, I'm not. And so finding that balanced center was very, very important to the founding fathers, because that keeps us even and keeps us balanced. And I think that I never ever hear anybody talk about that.
I've got some very serious thoughts about that. You've hit on two of my pet peeves, my soapboxes. Can you hang on through the break? I'm up against a break.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, hang on. I want to talk about both of those topics. I want to talk about the founders. I want to talk about the far right, left, and the center, and about the anarchy that you see around the state. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. I'll be right back after this break. Cheers.
TWC.health/Brandon. This is one of our sponsors, has been now for a few years. Here it is. You just go there. If you use that URL, folks, you not only save money, but our program gets credit, which helps us keep doing great shows like this for free and pushing them out. TWC.health/Brandon. Look up here at the top of the page where it says Med Kits. Go down there to the one that says Contagion Emergency Kit. Contagion Emergency Kit. That's the one you want, right, Dr. McCullough?
Right. That's going to cover bird flu. Just you start on day one. I think all the animal workers, people in rural areas need to have these. You can't wait around for the pharmacist. If you start early, that comes with telemedicine. We can intensify the antivirals, get other drugs going. Very affordable. Join through Brandon's website. Join as a member, because we're working on ways to replace the used drugs, and you have to be a member to get that advantage.
The Right Side with Doug Billings, coming to you from the fruited plains of America.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, indeed, right here, smack dab in the middle of the fruited plain of the United States of America. David from Florida on the line. And David, all right, so you hit on a couple of my pet peeve issues with regards to the radical liberal woke movement in America. So let me take one at a time. Regarding your concerns, and I think your excellent analysis about who is around and who surrounds President Trump, that has been undoubtedly, in my opinion, and apparently yours too, one of his Achilles heels. That the people that he surrounds himself with, I don't know what the deal is, but he has not been able to vet and keep people out. We can look to the first term. You've got everybody from Mad Dog Mattis to John Bolton to even Rex Tillerson, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. So it is an issue. And I have spoken, I've met with the president a couple of times. I've been there for events and I've seen him. I've speak with him about the General Flynn, a good friend of mine. We talk about this, and it's frustrating. I have no answer or remedy other than, yes, pray that he has wisdom, that he can receive wisdom from the Holy Spirit. Wisdom with a capital W. I talk about this from time to time because we on the right side, we approach life in general, and we certainly approach politics, I think, in the right manner. We do, most of us, most of the time, we pray for wisdom. We want to see things for what they are. We want to know the truth, wisdom of the Holy Spirit, come to us, etc. And then we reflect as conservatives. We don't react like the radical liberal mob does, but we reflect, and then we take action. And our action is peaceful action. Our action is not what the J6 events, I'll just use that as an example. Those were other people posing as conservatives who started the riots, who started the nonsense and the violence. Conservative Americans, especially conservatives within the MAGA movement, do not engage in that kind of activity. And then finally, so wisdom, reflection, action, and then we have to gift ourselves with the gift of patience. We have to see this through. We did not get here overnight. We're not going to get out of this overnight. And then your other topic, the far right, center, left, and all that. I believe, first, I think you're right on this topic as well. They paint us with a broad brush, the radical right extremists. My gosh, if we believe in God and if we believe that the divine providence of God should have some sort of a role in our society, we're labeled as right-wing extremists. Never mind that every one of the founding fathers, every one of them acknowledged the divine providence of God. In fact, it was the divine providence of God that inspired the founders to write our founding documents. And in my opinion, I've said this on the show, our party, the conservative movement in America, I have not really used the word Republican in a couple of years because there's problems within the Republican Party with rhinos and people who really are not true conservatives. So I use the term conservatives. But we are the only major party in America, conservatives, who can claim any allegiance to the divine providence of God and to the founding fathers. And the radical left movement, you'll see them on television during this campaign season, calling themselves patriots and putting forth flags and this and that and the other, mocking us in the all the while copying President Trump for not only his policies, but even the rallies that Kamala Harris, it's a complete copycat version of the Trump rallies. Now, let me tell you something, and I'll let you have the final word, David, but the thing about patriotism on the left, and this is my opinion based on how I view American patriotism, the radical left, as I call them, the Communist Socialist Party. There are no more Democrats in the elected class. None. They have blended communism and socialism together. And some would argue, well, they didn't just blend those, they blended fascism in there as well, and Marxism. Okay, I grant you all of that. But I've been calling them Communist Socialists since the day I started the show 4 years ago. You cannot be an American patriot and believe that America needs to be fundamentally transformed. It's impossible. No. It's counterintuitive. America does not need to be fundamentally transformed. The divine providence of God and the founding fathers got it right the first time. Okay, David, we got about 40 seconds left. What are your thoughts? I'll give you the last word.
Well, absolutely. In fact, we just saw the Secret Service on Kamala's side there just blatantly disregard a salon owner's property rights.
Yeah,
and that is a fundamental issue, because in our world, especially in our country, under our constitutional republic, and this is important. If property rights are secured, then life and liberty are secured. You take away any one of those three, and you don't have the other two. The rights to private property is so fundamental to our Constitution, it's not even funny. So if that's the first thing that they go after, if they have absolutely no regard for our personal property, then they won't have regard for anything else. This is an extremely troubling issue, private property rights, like and I'll reiterate it, where private property is secure, life and liberty are secure. It's so fundamental, and I wish that young people in this country would get involved in Civics 101 and realize just how inspirational and just how wonderful our founding fathers created our documents for that very purpose.
Well said, David. Well said and well met. Listen, I always appreciate hearing from you. Thanks for calling in to the right side. Appreciate you very much. So long.
Thank you, Doug. Have a great day. Bye.
You too. He's right, ladies and gentlemen. Look, and the good news, David, I hope you're still listening, because the good news is that multiple millions of young people, Generation Z, are coming over to the right side by the millions. And for the first time really in an election year, now you won't see this on the legacy media, and you'll see all of the liberals saying that I'm crazy. But look, there is evidence. I have several podcasting friends who have good sized audiences. They're Generation Z podcasters, and millions of people, these kids, they're looking around. They're not stupid. They see they may have voted for Biden, by the way. They may have. But now, after these 3.5 years, they're looking around just as any radical, not radical, but any mainstream, normal, non-radicalized Democrat may be looking around this country. They're going, this is not at all what I signed up for when I voted for Biden. There are millions of those kinds of people, and they're coming over to the right side, even if it may be only for this election cycle. And they are voting for Trump because they look at what they see and they realize that the crisis and chaos that has been thrust upon them, and this is what we're talking about today, has been thrust upon them by people like Governor Tim Walz and like Vice Pretender Harris, who have, by virtue of their actions and most of all by their inactions, caused a purposeful descent of chaos and crisis to sweep through this republic. And it is typical of the liberal playbook in whatever country you're in. This is what they do. This is how they excel. They create crisis and chaos, and it sweeps people in to believe that they need the government to rescue them. And it's only during election season where you'll begin to hear radical liberals talk about solutions to these problems. It is absolutely how they behave and how they act. A couple of more minutes. Let's go to the phone lines. Ladies and gentlemen, by the way, 901-316-8404. I always love to hear from you and talk about the topic of the day. 901-316-8404. Vince, our friend down under in Australia, welcome back to the right side, Vince.
Yeah, hi, Doug. Yeah, Doug, just a couple of points I'd like to relate, which I think will indirectly relate to Tampon Tim. Epic Times, I know years ago I read a story. They wrote that the CCP actually revealed in a conference in southern China, and I actually saw the text, the Chinese text. I had to plug it into Google Earth, where they stated a plan to influence America's elections. They said the key was just to target like key battleground counties, congressional districts. Excuse me. I ended up writing about that. And then secondly, Dan Ratcliffe, I remember he was the director of national intelligence in 2020. He had a report that confirmed foreign interference in the elections from Iran, the CCP. But the problem was that report wasn't released until, wait for it, January the 7th, the day after January 6th. Why was that?
Yeah.
And then Tim, because Tim Walz, we know he's so heavily in bed with the CCP, being there 25 times, and all that time, it makes me think constantly of that 3-minute Freedom Road video where those two women just claiming how they were so proud of sparking the riots there in Minnesota, all the burning. And it's just funny too. Yesterday, I actually listened to an interview between Rob Manus on Worldview Tube. He interviewed Rob Spencer from Jihad Watch, which was about the radical Islamic links Tim Walz also has. So he's in bed with the radical Islamists and the CCP. I mean, what a diabolical concoction there. Yeah. Anyway, I'll just get your thoughts. Yeah.
No, well met and well said. Yeah, that there are many states within the United States that are problematic with regards to the land rights, the land grab. China, I cannot, for the life of me, I cannot wrap my head around why any governor anyone within would say, okay, sure, China, come on in and buy up this hundreds of thousands of farmland that we have. We need, we just had a primary season here in the Midwest where I live. I'm right in the middle of the country, and primary season, as we gear up for our election, governors running races that were actually campaigning on our side to prevent that, to stop it. We have got to stop this land grab. So I think you're onto something, Vince. I've always thought that it's crazy. I don't get it. And ironically, they typically, if not always, end up buying farmland that, coincidentally happens to abut military bases in the United States. Imagine that, Vince.
But curious thing too, Bill Gates is buying up land now.
Yes.
Back, he was welcomed in China like royalty, but Anthony Blinken goes there and he's treated like with contempt. Which, and to me, that just shows how you get the radical, Marxism, but also the fascism element merging big government and corporation. To me, that's globalism. I think globalism is the dystopian trinity of Marxism, fascism, and crony capitalism, actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Vince, I appreciate you. I really do. I always love hearing from you. I've got up against a time block here that I've got to let you go. Hey, do me a favor. Tell everybody down there under about us. Tell them about the program. Share it, and love hearing from you. And I do get emails from time to time from people from Australia. And I always wonder in the back of my mind, I wonder if that's a friend of Vince's down there. So I appreciate you very much. Share the word.
Yeah, and just for David from Florida, a great book he should read, Debunking Howard Zinn by Mary Grabar.
Okay.
That's the fake history of his. That's a great book. If David's still on there, Debunking Howard Zinn by Mary Grabar. Yeah, God. She's a daughter of Slovenian immigrants. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
Thank you, my friend. All right. God bless. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, look, 901-316, by the way, 8404, 901-316-8404. Phone lines open if you want to get in on the conversation today. If you want to get a look and understand who Governor Tim Walz is as governor, we have that record. We can show you. We can demonstrate to you what he's done. We have the word of police officers and fire officials, fire department, firemen and women and first responders. We have the words of hospital workers and so forth. And we understand it doesn't take much to see evidence, as I say, of the obvious. What he's done as governor. Now, what would that look like as vice president, right? You multiply what he's done in Minnesota times 10, and that's probably a little close to what you would get as a vice president. Imagine what he would be like in that role, able to control tax dollars, for example, where to spend them, where to not spend them, on what would he spend money on, what would he defund? We know the answers to these questions. It's because he's already done it. He would take money away from police. He would take money away from firefighters and first responders, and he would take them away from people who try to serve and protect in almost any form or fashion. That's what he's done as governor. Why would we ever suggest or think that he would change? What if North Korea or other rogue nations became a problem and decided to act up? Are we convinced that Walz and Kamala Harris are the solution to that problem? You've got to be kidding me. There's no one with any shred of intellectual maturity who would believe that those two, the joy and happiness couple, would be able to actually solve any national crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, they want crisis. We can't draw any other conclusion. They do nothing to solve it when it's surrounding us. And they have the audacity to say things like, hey, if you put me in office, I'll solve all of these problems. Well, they've already caused them. Kamala Harris specifically already in there, causing the problems that she claims now that she wants to fix. For crying out loud, they specialize in causing crisis and chaos. They are the ticket of terror. All right, up against a break. Ladies and gentlemen, 901-316-8404. Coming up on our last segment of the program, if you want to be part of it, 901-316-8404. I'll be right back after this break. Cheers.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepcid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHouseBG.com.
The Right Side with Doug Billings, pointing out the intellectual immaturity of liberals.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Right Side with Doug Billings. This is, we look at Tim Walz, Tampon Tim from Minnesota. We see the evidence of the obvious. And let me give some fair time and some fair play to Kamala here in all of this, because she's been working in tandem with Governor Tim. I can tell you that unequivocally, and almost 100% assuredly has been working in tandem with him since 2020 during all of this. What's never reported in the mainstream legacy media is that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris were in contact with one another during the months of riots, looting, arson, and anarchy that took place in Minnesota. And they coordinated their actions. They worked together. To be more precise, they coordinated their inactions, what they wouldn't do. And when Governor Walz would take no action to stop the riots, which in effect encouraged the rioters, he therefore then has blood on his hands, ladies and gentlemen. He has the destruction of Minnesota businesses and lives, all of that destruction on his hands. That's his responsibility. Kamala Harris, where Governor Walz would take no action, Kamala Harris took action. Oh, did she ever? She took action to set up funding mechanisms and platforms for the anarchists in the off chance that the police, who were drastically understaffed and underfunded, in the off chance they would be able to arrest these anarchists, Kamala made sure that there were platforms available so that they could get bailed out, so that there was fundraising going on. Imagine that. This is something that we should be talking about and sharing. Forget AI and the crowd sizes. Forget about whether or not people are really in the arena. That makes no difference to the campaign, and it makes no difference to our victory. Focus on the issues. And when I am lucky enough to be with him again, I'm going to make sure that Trump knows this. We have got, and everyone from Flynn on up, anyone I can get my hands on and say, hey, listen to me. And ladies and gentlemen, please stop. Look, there are people out there that put forth nonsense. We need to work and live and react within the truth and take action within the truth. In Minnesota, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, coordinating their efforts and their actions and inactions, letting Minnesota, Minneapolis specifically, burn. She failed, and we look back in time. It's not just Minnesota in 2020, but let's look at Kamala. Let's look at what she did in California when she was a district attorney, which was oftentimes failing to prosecute with extreme prejudice violent criminals. If she were to prosecute them, light sentences, and very often, if not always, let out early. That practice, by the way, is common among all liberal district attorneys and state's attorneys general. Light sentences, early release. Let's get them back out on the street. Very common. You've seen it, you heard it, and you know it to be true. Liberal, it's one of the liberal pillars of their movement. The radical pillar of chaos. Let's continue to enable it, to let it happen. And how one way to do that is to release the violent criminals back out on the streets. And I can tell you story after story where there was a violent criminal in custody being sentenced with gun charges who was released early, if he was even kept at all, back to the streets. to commit more crime, and most usually with guns. And when gun violence happens, ladies, this may sound harsh, and it may get me canceled in certain parts of social media. The radical left liberal hierarchy, the elites within that party, ladies and gentlemen, they want chaos. They want violent crime, and they want gun crime to continue to happen, because every time it does, it opens up the doorway to talk about gun control. There are more than enough laws on the books to create a huge dent in this problem. And look, the truth is, we will never be able to 100% eliminate gun violence in this country. It's one of the products of living in a free society. But we can curtail it, and we can dent it, seriously dent it, if we would just, with extreme prejudice, pursue these violent criminals and sentence them to the full force of the law and what it allows. No more early releases. What their outcomes could be no more clear with anything that you want to look at, not just gun violence. You can look at open borders. You can look at defunding the police, not reporting crimes. Then that's another one. Oh, crime is an all-time low. Well, never mind that we're not reporting, or we're not documenting criminals. So they say crime is at an all-time low. It's comical if it wasn't tragic. Light sentences, early releases, sanctuary cities for criminals and illegals where ICE and Department of Homeland Security can't touch these people. Governors like Tim Walz who allow riots, arson, looting, rape, pillaging, murder, arson, anarchy. We can go on and on. They allow it because they want it. They want the chaos. They want the crime because in their mind, in their sick, twisted, disease-infested liberal mind, they believe that when crime happens, it drives people to the government to seek help. And it allows them to then talk about removing our rights, specifically free speech and the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, which shall not be infringed. Oh, but Doug, no one needs an assault rifle. Nobody needs it. In the colonial days, all they had were muskets. You want to talk about that as a line of defense about your behavior? Muskets were the most advanced firearm of the day. They wanted, the founding fathers, they wanted the citizenry to have the most advanced firearms possible. We could talk about it, ladies and gentlemen. There is no logic or intellectual maturity behind the radical liberal movement. Thank you very much for being part of the program. Wow, you get me worked up, ladies and gentlemen. DougBillings.us, that is your destination. DougBillings.us. Please prayerfully consider setting up a recurring monthly donation over there. I will see you tomorrow, 5 o'clock to 6 Central Time. God bless you, ladies and gentlemen. Believe it for the Republic. Cheers.
Welcome to Technocracy News with your host, Patrick Wood. I'm Logan House. We got a couple articles we're going to